ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। नमः विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमति भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पश्चादेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। मुखं करोति वाचालं पंगं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुदीनतारणं परमानन्दं माधवम्। So we'll resume our discussion on the third canto, sixth chapter, from verse 30. So this is part of the conversation between Maitreya Rishi and Vidur. And Maitreya is describing the Virat Roop to Vidur. So in the previous set of verses, he had described the development of the Virat Roop, how the various senses came about in their respective places, the Adibhut and the Adhisthan, and then from that comes the demigods controlling the senses, the corresponding senses in the living entities, their abilities to perform action. So after describing the development of the Virat Roop, Maitreya now describes how the entire universe is contained within the Virat Roop. So in the previous set of verses, he had spoken about how the heavenly planets and the devas who are in the Satogun come from the head. And the earthly planets and the humans who are in Rajas come from the legs. And the sky, or the Bhuvar, where the associates of the Rudra reside in Tamagun, come from the abdomen. And he will continue to describe the dependence of the various aspects of the material existence on the Virat Roop. So we'll resume from verse 30. Mukto vartata brahma purushasya kurudvaha yastan mukhatvad varnanam mukhyobhyod brahmano guruhu. O chief of the Kuru dynasty, the Vedic wisdom became manifested from the mouth of the Virat, the gigantic form. Those who are inclined to this Vedic knowledge are called Brahmanas, and they are natural teachers and spiritual masters of all the orders of society. So in 4 verses, from 30 to 33, Maitreya will describe how the 4 Varnas emanate from the 4 body parts of the Virat Purush. So here he mentions that the Brahmanas, they come from the mouth. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he takes the opportunity to point out that a Brahmana is one who knows the science of Krishna. that unless unless one is an expert in that, then one should not take on a position of a guru. So he quotes this verse from the Padma Purana: Sat karma nipuna vipro mantra tadra visharadaha avishnash guru nashyad vaishnava swa pako guru. That an impersonalist can become a qualified Brahman, but he cannot become a spiritual master unless and until he is promoted to the stage of a Vaishnava or a devotee of the personality of the Godhead. So, so one who is conversant in the Vedic wisdom is a Brahmana, but only a Brahmana who is a pure Vaishnava and knows the science of Krishna can become a guru. And actually, by the mercy of Mahaprabhu, even one who is not a Brahmana, but if he is a pure Vaishnava, can become a guru. So this was one of the controversies between the Brahman and a Vaishnava. And Bhakti Siddhanta wrote a paper on it, an authoritative paper, in which he mentioned that a Vaishnava knows the science of Krishna, and that is why he is superior to a Brahman, and that is why it is recommended that one take shelter of a Vaishnava, because the ultimate goal is to go back to Godhead. Verse 31. Bahubhya vartata kshatram kshatriyastadanuvartataha yojatastrayate varnan parushe kantaka kshata. Thereafter, the power of protection was generated from the arms of the gigantic Virat form. And in relation to such power, the Kshatriyas also came into existence by following the Kshatriya principle of protecting society from the disturbance of thieves and miscreants. So Prabhupada says that the word anuvartata is significant. That a person who follows the Kshatriya principle by protecting society from thieves and miscreants is called a Kshatriya, not the one who is simply born as a Kshatriya. So Prabhupada makes this point that there is no Vedic support of a seminal caste system, where the child of a Brahman is a Brahman and the child of a Kshatriya is a Kshatriya, and so forth. That only when one is qualified and has the qualification, then that person acquires that varna. Now, to be fair, the Manu Samitis, and there are scriptures that do point to the seminal caste system. The indication there is that they're pointing more to the fact that because one inherits the propensities of the parent, and one also inherits the propensity of the environment in which the characteristics of the environment in which they grow up. So a child that is born of Brahman parents will have more Brahmanical nature, and because he will be brought up in that environment, he will also have those tendencies. So he is more inclined to be Brahmanical. So there is some deference to that, but this concept of the caste system is a lot different from the Varna system. The caste system, it's actually a devolution of the whole process that apparently was actually initiated by the Brahmins in order to protect their position. The next verse 32. Vishwavartanta tasyorvor Vishorvartanta tasyorvor Lokaviti karir vibaho Vaishyastad ubhavo vartam Nranamya samavartayat. The means of livelihood of all persons, namely production of grains and the distribution to the prajas, was generated from the thighs of the Lord's gigantic form. The mercantile men who take charge of such execution are called Vaishyas. So Prabhupada says that the Vaishyas are divided into many subsections. They are the Kshetri or the landowners. Some are called the Krishans or the land tillers. Some are called the Tilavanik or the grain raisers. Some are called the Gandhavanik or the merchants in spices. Some are called the Suvarnavanik or merchants in gold and banking. So the word Vanik later on devolved into what is now called Baniyas right now, but their original word, Sanskrit word was Vanik. So these are the Vaishyas who essentially they're farmers. Like Krishna, he was, even though born from a Kshatriya source, but he grew up with Nand Maharaj and family, and they are in the Vaishya Varna because they were essentially doing cow protection and farming. So different categories of Vaishyas. Next verse. Adbyan bhagvato jajne shushurasya dharma siddhaye tasyam jata pura shudro yadvritya tushayate hari. Thereafter, service was manifested from the legs of the personality of Godhead for the sake of perfecting the religious functions. Situated on the legs are the Shudras, who satisfy the Lord by service. So it's interesting to note that Shudras are considered to be the lowest among the Varnas, but the verse is actually glorifying them the most, that they satisfy the Lord by service. So the Shudras, they assist the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas in their service to the Lord. So their propensity is to engage in the service of others, and if the master that they engage to serve is properly situated, they also become properly situated. Prabhupada says that it is actually better to be a Shudra than to be a properly situated a Shudra than to be a Brahman and not develop the service attitude. So the point is making is that sometimes Brahmins become proud that they are the apex of the Varna and they expect everybody to serve them. But all the Varnas are designed to serve according to their propensity, the personality of Godhead. Some by their intellect, some by their valor, some by their ability to trade, and some by the ability to serve others. So better to be a properly situated Shudra than to be an improperly situated Brahmana. So in 4 verses, in verse 30, from the mouth of the Virat Roop, the Brahmanas came, who have the role of teachers and gurus. 31, from the arms of the Virat Roop, the Kshatriyas came with the power of protection to protect the society from miscreants and disturbances. In 32, from the thighs of the Virat Roop, the Vaishyas came as a means of livelihood to produce grains for the Praja. And 33 is from the legs for the sake of service in the enacting of dharma. The Shudras came to satisfy the Lord by service. Next verse, 34. Ete varna swadharmena yajanti swagurun harim shraddhayatma vishuddhyartham yajata sahavrittibihi. All these different social divisions are born with the different occupational duties and living conditions from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, for unconditional life and self-realization, one has to worship the Supreme Lord under the direction of the spiritual master. So the point that is made over here is that the Varnas, they appear along with their livelihood. So when Krishna has created the Varnas, he has also created the means to support the people in that Varna. So in worshipping Krishna, one should not be worried about one's livelihood, but the focus should be in how best can I use my swabhav, my inherent propensity to serve the Lord through intellect, through valor, through trade, or through service. But Krishna has provided. He has provided for the welfare of all the Varnas. And Srila Prabhupada mentions that it is necessary that the Varnas should, so the purification of the Varna should be done under the direction of the spiritual master. So Maitreya is making this point over here because when you align the Varnas to the service of the Lord, then the guidance of a guru is very important. Otherwise, one will become whimsical or one may become materialistic. The Brahmana may become proud of its teaching. The Kshatriya may become arrogant. The Vaishyas may become greedy. The Shudras may become lethargic. So it is therefore important for all the Varnas to be under the constant guidance of a spiritual master. And Prabhupada says who's not only a Brahman but also a Vaishnava, because they can use the Varnashram to purify the person and help the person proceed to the subsequent stage of the life. Otherwise, the person will simply just keep circulating in different Varnas, which is not the purpose of the Varnashram system. Verse 35. Etad kshatar bhagvato deva karmatma rupinaha kaha shraddhayat upakartam yogamaya balo O Vidur, who can estimate or measure the transcendental time, work, and potency of the gigantic form manifested by the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? So Maitreya is finished describing the Virat Roop, and he finishes with an acknowledgement of the fact that it is difficult to describe the Virat Roop. So in 6 verses, from 35 till the end of the chapter, 40, he will express his own inadequacy in describing the Virat Purush. So he says the Virat Purush has the nature of Daivya. It has the nature of time and karma and activity. And he says that it is a product of Krishna's Yogamaya. And earlier on, the Virat Purush was described as being as a result of the influence of Mahamaya. But actually, the Virat Purush is always under Yogamaya, because the Virat Purush is an expansion of Krishna. He can never be under Mahamaya. So he may be surrounded with Mahamaya. Krishna may be surrounded by his energy, which is what happens in the material world. But Maitreya is clarifying over here that he is not materially contaminated. He may have a body of matter. It may be temporary, but nevertheless, he is completely spiritual. And Srila Prabhupada gave the example of deities, that they are made of matter. They're temporary, in the sense they're made and at some point they may get destroyed. But when they're worshipped as Archavigraha, they're spiritual. So same way, one has to consider the Virat Roop. And Maitreya is saying that even desiring to describe the Virat Purush is impossible. What to speak of actually describing it? So he's using this hyperbole to make a point. Now, of course, he is describing the Virat Purush, but he's going one level beyond, saying that forget about describing. Even if one desires to describe the Virat Purush, that itself is impossible. So the point he's making is that it is beyond conception. But yet, and we have seen in the Bhagavatam, 6 times the Virat Purush is described. And the reason is that it allows us to get a glimpse into what is happening. Verse 36. Tathapi kirtyami yathapi kirtyamya anga yatha mati yatha shrutam kirtim hare swam satkartum girim anya vidhasatim. In spite of my inability, whatever I have been able to hear from the spiritual master and whatever I could assimilate, I am now describing in glorification of the Lord by pure speech. For otherwise, my power of speaking would remain unchaste. So Maitreya is concluding this part of the discourse with this declaration. So he's speaking whatever was told to him. And he's also accepting the fact that everything that was told to him, he could not understand. He did not understand. So he is saying that whatever I heard and whatever I could assimilate. So this term yatha shrutam, yatha mati is important for all devotees, that they should speak only what they have heard. Yatha shrutam. And of what they have heard, they should explain only that which they have understood. Yatha mati. Now, of course, they can repeat what they have heard, even if they don't understand. But they should not explain what they have not understood. So, yatha shrutam, yatha mati. Speak what you have heard and explain what you have understood. And when we hear senior devotees speaking, then you see this point coming through, that when they speak, they will either quote Srila Prabhupada, or they'll quote some acharyas, some scriptures, or they will say, this is what I heard, I'm saying. I did not understand it completely, but this is what I heard. Personally, for me, one of the most alarming thing is when people are speaking and then they start presenting their own opinions. They say, this is what I think, and this is my consumption. Even if sometimes they do it implicitly, which is worse. Sometimes they'll do it explicitly, which is a little better. At least they're putting this warning sign. But even that is to me a red flag. That we are not really in that business of commingling our own conjectures into this. We can always present our realizations. That's what the process is about, in line with what we have. Yatha shrutam, yatha mati. But deviating from that is a slippery slope. And it may seem innocuous, but the Prabhupada would say that it's like a wife no longer being chaste to her husband. He quoted Mahaprabhu in this. So it has a lot more deeper implications. So Maitreya, in humility, he's saying that yatha shrutam yatha mati. Whatever I heard, and of that whatever I could understand, I have explained to you. And Prabhupada writes strongly about this. And he says that to avoid unchaste conscious activities, he was describing the unlimited glories of the Lord, although he did not have the ability to describe them perfectly. The glorification is not a product of research, but hearing submissively from the authority of the spiritual master. Then he says it's not possible to repeat all that one has heard from a spiritual master, but one can narrate as far as possible by one's honest endeavor. It does not matter whether the Lord's glories are fully explained or not. One must attempt to engage one's bodily, mental, and verbal activities in the transcendental glorification of the Lord. Otherwise, such activities will remain unchaste and unpure. So Srila Prabhupada adds a third yatha in this, because he's a guru. So yatha shrutam, yatha mati, yatha charan. So as you hear, as you understand, and as your acharyas. So all three of them should be in resonance. Not well, resonance, yes, but one may hear a lot, one may understand a little bit, and one may act on a part of what they understand. But that becomes your adhikar now. That what you do, that becomes your adhikar in telling the other person to do. What you understand becomes your adhikar in repeating to the other person. And what you hear becomes your adhikar in transmitting, in repeating to the other person. Okay, next verse, 37. Ekantalaban vachaso nupumshan Shushlokamoler gunavadamahu Shutesha vidbadhi upakratayam Katha sudayam upsam prayogam. The highest perfectional gain of humanity is to engage in discussions of the activities and glories of the pious actor. Such activities are so nicely arranged in writing by the greatly learned sages that the actual purpose of the ear is served just by being near them. So Vidur might say that we might say Maitreya Rishi. So you're accepting the fact that whatever you're telling me is incomplete because of yata shrute yata mati. Will that become an impediment in my spiritual understanding? Will I not be, because I have got something that is not complete, will that be an obstacle in my advancement? So this implicit question is answered here, that Maitreya is saying that no one can have complete knowledge about the ocean of topics of the Lord. One should have faith, and faith in that is acquired by Shushrata, by hearing and by chanting of the Lord. So he's saying that is the essence of how you would make spiritual advancement. That by having faith that grows, by chanting and hearing about the Lord, is what will drive your advancement. Describing anything else is a waste of words. And he says the highest ekanta labham, that the highest attainment is to hear about the nectarian topics of the Lord, that is described by the learned. So Prabhupada says that the word gunavadam is significant because the qualities of the Lord and his activities and pastimes are the subject matter of the discussion of the devotees. A rishi like Maitreya is certainly not interested in discussing anything pertaining to mundane qualities. Yet he says that the highest perfectional stage of transcendental realization is to discuss the Lord's activities. Jiva Goswami therefore concludes that topics regarding the transcendental activities of the Lord are far beyond the transcendental realization of Kevalya happiness. So the completeness or incompleteness is not really relevant. What is relevant is the faith and the attachment to hearing the topics about the Lord. So a corollary question might be asked that if incompleteness is not a criteria, then why is one instructed not to hear from non-bona fide speakers. And the point that is made over here is that actually what is being transmitted through this Shravan Kirtan is faith. And those who are not bona fide do not have that faith. If they had faith, they would take shelter themselves. But because they lack it, they assume the position of gurus and they transmit their own subtle consciousness, which is yatha mati tatha gati. That whatever you think, that is okay. And the person receiving it will also absorb that consciousness. So the famous analogy of milk and poison. They may be speaking Krishna Katha, but it's contaminated by their consciousness. This is when one is hearing from a bona fide source with faith. The person may not be able to know everything or describe everything, even if the person is supremely competent. Maitreya is saying is, it's just not possible. In the next verse, he'll make this point over and over again. Just not possible to describe the Lord. Earlier on, he said that you can't describe the Virat Roop. Just thinking about describing it is also a fallacy. But that should not discourage you. If a bona fide person is speaking according to his understanding and realization, then once that connection is established, faith will travel. And that is the whole process of spiritual advancement. Okay. Let me stop here and see if there's any discussion. Okay, if there is none, then we'll move on to verse 38. Atmano vasito vatsa mahima kavinadina samvatsar sahasrante dhyayoga vipakkaya. O my son, the original poet Brahma, after mature meditation for 1,000 celestial years, could know only that the glories of the Supreme Soul are inconceivable. So Maitreya was so far using himself as an example that I could not understand. And of what I heard, I could understand a part of it only. So Vidur might say, are there others that I can approach? And he says, even Brahma, he's the personification of intelligence, initiated by Krishna himself. He received the Vedas from Krishna, expert in the Vedas. And he's the source of the knowledge of the great sages. So he meditated for 1,000 celestial years. And after that, he concluded that it is unable to understand the powers of the Lord. So the term avasitaha, so avasita means where's the word avasita? Known. So avasita means known, and it is interpreted in 3 ways. So one is avasita is implying that can the powers of the Lord be ever known? So this is lamentation that Brahma, the most materially intelligent person, after such a long time, could not understand them. So this is lamentation. Can the powers of the Lord be known? Second is avasita, is a negative of vasita. Vasita means penetrated. That the glories of the Lord could not be penetrated after comprehensive studies by Brahma. So this is wonderment. That look at the glories of the Lord. That even Brahma, supremely intelligent, for 1,000 years tried to penetrate them, tried to understand them, but failed. Look how wonderful the glories are. And the third is, after 1,000 years, the glories of the Lord were understood to be impossible to understand. So this is avasita, implying acceptance of the inconceivable. So there are three successively increasing levels of realization in acknowledging the glories of the Lord. So the first level is lamentation. That I'm trying to understand the glories of the Lord. I should have succeeded, but I have failed. So it's an immature level because there is certain expectation in the person that I will succeed. Second is awe and wonderment, which is one is now beginning to acknowledge that the glories of the Lord are vast. And the third is acceptance, most mature, that one finally understands that the glories of the Lord are beyond comprehension. So in the Kena Upanishad, that is said, Yasya matam tasya matam, matam yasya navedasa. The Lord is known to he who does not think the Lord is limited. He who thinks the Lord is limited does not know him. So similar verses are there, that Krishna is understood by one who understands that Krishna cannot be understood. Okay, next verse, 39. Ato bhagavato maya mayinam api mohini yat swayam chatma vartmatma naved kim utapare. The wonderful potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is bewildering even to the jugglers. The potency is unknown even to the self-sufficient Lord. So it is certainly unknown to others. So Maitreya starts the work with Ata. So Ata means therefore. And it's a continuation of the premise that he established in the previous verse, that even the greatly learned Brahma, after 1,000 years of meditation, is unable to understand the glories of the Lord. So he's saying, therefore, what hope is there for others? Especially, he says, the Mayanam. Mayanam are those who have offered themselves completely to Maya. So they have no hopes of understanding this. And then Maitreya Rishi goes to the other extreme. And he says, what to speak of Brahma? Even Krishna does not understand his own potency fully. So what to speak of Brahma? And what to speak of people like us who are Mayana, who are under the clutches of Maya? There is no hope. So then why even try? And the reason is that Krishna reveals oneself to the extent that one seeks Krishna. So one may not be able to understand Krishna, but Krishna can make himself understood. And that is the difference. And the second point, the first is a little bit esoteric, mystical. And the second point is that even if we understand according to our ability, yatamati, that itself will build faith. So this whole process of the creation of the Virat Roop, etc., it is difficult to understand. But the underlying principle that is being made over and over again is that everything is dependent on Krishna. The Pradhan is inert. When Krishna glances, then the Pradhan begins to act, and the Mahatattva gets created. Then the Mahatattva is lying inert, and the Devas are there. The Devas have no powers. They pray to Krishna, and then Krishna enters as the Virat Roop. And even though it's not mentioned in this 3.5 description of Virat Roop, but in the second canto, the connection of the Virat Roop with Krishna is also established. That everything that the Virat Roop develops, each and every sense that he develops, is because they are there in Krishna. So that connection is established over and over again. So we may not able to understand that how from the ears of the Virat Roop, Vayu appears. But we can understand that the Virat Roop has ears because Krishna has ears. And because Krishna has imbued his energy, the Virat Roop is developing. So that develops faith. Prabhupada says that one can see that in a small banyan fruit, there are thousands of seeds. And in each seed, there is a tree. And in each tree, there is millions of fruits. And in each of those fruits, there are millions of seeds. So one may not be able to fully comprehend all that is going on, but just appreciating that how all this is being enacted, one automatically develops faith in the Lord. Okay, next verse. So the last verse. Yata prapya anvartanta vachascha manasa saha aham chanya me devas tasmai bhagavate namaha. Words, mind, and ego, with their respective controlling demigods, have failed to achieve success in knowing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, we simply have to offer our respectful obeisances unto him as a matter of sanity. So this verse is speaking about the superiority of bhakti over Gyan. So Maitreya was a Gyan Mishra Bhakta. We saw that when we were discussing the reciprocation of Krishna with Uddhav and Maitreya. Krishna was a little turned away from Maitreya, leaning favorably towards Uddhav, revealing more confidential secrets to Uddhav, because there was this tinge of Gyan in the bhakti of Maitreya. Now, he was, of course, an advanced devotee, which is why he got personal audience of Krishna. But the fact that he's making this statement over here indicates that Gyan Mishra has been rectified by the association of Uddhav and the audience of Krishna, which is why it makes his statements to Vidur more potent. If they were coming from, so we say that Sukadeva Goswami was a monist. He was a Brahmavadi. Why would we meditate so intensely on what a Brahmavadi said? We have no interest in it. But we do, because he, from a Brahmavadi, he became a pure devotee. Similarly, there are 2 full cantos that are dedicated to the instructions by Maitreya Rishi. Why would Srila Vyasadeva put them in Bhagavatam? Because, as this verse indicates, that his consciousness changed from being a Jnana Mishra Bhakta to a Shuddha Bhakta. And the point that he's making is one that comes from the humility of a devotee, that we cannot know Krishna because he is aprapya. Aprapya is that he is unknowable. And Vishwanath Chakravarti gives this example of that we cannot know the family or the fortunes of a farmer simply by studying his wheat crop or the bread baked from it. If one wants to know the details of a farmer's life, it is necessary to develop an affectionate relationship with him. Then only would the farmer reveal his personal details. Similarly, only bhakti, a relationship of affection for and service to Krishna, will induce the Lord to reveal intimate knowledge about himself. So famous was Bhakti Amam Abhijanati, that one can understand me as I am only by devotional service. So for the ascending process, Krishna is unknowable. Krishna is only knowable when he reveals himself through the descending process. So in the Taittiriya Upanishad, the statement is made, Yatavacho nivritante aprapya manasa saha. That words along with the mind turn back from the Lord who cannot be fully understood. So the intention of the verse is that it is impossible to measure the Lord because of his infinity by either words or by mind. But then there are statements that seem to contradict this. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Vedesha sarver ahameva vedyo, that I am known by the Vedas. In the Brihad Arnakya Upanishad, he says, Manasevano drishtvayam etadameyam dhruvam, that immeasurable, unchanging Lord should be known by the mind. And in the Rig Veda, this is something that we recite before deity worship, Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam Sada Pashanti Surya, that the devotees always see the supreme form of the Lord. And all these injunctions are talking about seeing the Lord to the extent that he reveals himself. Vedesecha sarve ram eva vedyo. That through the Vedas, when one executes the process of bhakti, then one is able to understand. Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam Sada Pashanti Surya. That why does the devotee always see the supreme form of the Lord? Not because he has understood that the form of the Lord is 3 feet tall or 6 feet tall, and his eyes are like this and his nose are like that, but because he has captured the form of the Lord with affection in his heart. So this ends the 7th chapter and 6th chapter, sorry. So I'll pause here and see if there is any discussion on what we have spoken so far.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Hello.
Yes, Prabhu, I can hear you.
Ah, yes, Prabhuji. I trying from phone first time, Prabhu. So I just Prabhuji, when you are explaining that the completeness is not so important. I was remembering the Bhagavatam verse that Tadva Visarga Vinata Tadva Visarga Janataga Viplabhavati. Even the compositions were imperfectly sung and glorified, but still they will purify, bring revolution in the hearts of people. So I was just recollecting, Prabhuji, that one. And one question, Prabhuji, sometimes when somebody asks, we have discussions, when we discuss with devotees in our groups. So during the presentation or something, if somebody asks a question, we try to answer, and we will say that based on my understanding, this is it. But please correct me. But I feel that many times it happens that because the session is only 1 hour or something, most times people will choose to silent instead of correcting. So is it better for us to be silent in that scenario, or we can still share that this is my understanding? What should we do?
So you're saying that somebody asks a question and then you answer it based on what your understanding of the relevant tattva is.
Correct.
So that's more or less what the process that's been described, that yatha shruti yatha matim, that as long as the understanding is in line with what you have heard. Sometimes what happens is or oftentimes what happens is that people are very reluctant not to answer a question, because it shows that there is a limitation on their part. It exposes the fact that, especially when they're, I'm talking more from personal experience, probably doesn't happen to any of you, but you give a class and a person asks you a question, and then you may not know the answer to the question, but it is difficult to accept it because it's like accepting that I don't know. And the ego is it does not like that position. So what do you do then? Then you basically start what you don't know, you put in with your own speculation, right? And then you try to create some fence that somebody else might correct me if they want to. So after you have speculated, the damage is already done. So you can't go and stab a person and say, if there's a doctor in the house, please come in and dress the wounds, right? So from the position of having integrity to the process, one should speak firstly what they have heard, and one should explain what they have understood. So as I mentioned, there are several times when senior devotees, they will give quotes from Prabhupada. They will say, this is what Prabhupada said, right? And they will leave it at that. So this is just repeating what they have heard the Acharya said. And sometimes they will explain also, if it is appropriate, they will explain. But I have never heard a well-situated devotee saying that this is what I understand, you can go ahead and interpret whatever you want, and somebody might want to correct me, that's fine also. Because the damage has already been done. You have already deviated, right? You have already put poison in the milk. And now you're saying that another person can come and extract the poison. So it is mostly for our own integrity. So Krishna might protect the other persons who are receiving it, but Krishna will not protect the person who is taking that role.
Correct. Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you. Prabhuji.
We also, when we listen to Maharaj's lecture, very often Maharaj would say, "I don't know this. It's not. I've never heard of this, so I cannot go any further." Or he would say, "This is what Prabhupada says. This is what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says." I've always seen. Yeah, I've never seen him saying anything guessing. No guessing game from Maharaj. It's his classic example is Maharaj.
Yeah. I mean, I had him in mind when I was saying that. But yeah, most of the senior devotees, or all the senior devotees, they take that position. This is what I heard from Prabhupada. That's the first reference. This is what I heard from hear from acharyas, and they are not at all shy of saying, "I don't know." If somebody asks a question, I can't. I've lost count of the number of times when Maharaj has told me, "I don't know." And in retrospection, it's basically silly questions that I was asking. And part of the I don't know is that it's not a question that's worth answering. And part of the I don't know is, yes, I don't know. I don't know why Krishna has a peacock feather on his head. Why doesn't he have an ostrich feather? Why doesn't he have a feather of a swan? I don't know. Right. So it's a combination of both, but very, 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 very transparent and honest in adhering to the words of the acharyas and the words of the Guru.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Even sometimes Maharaj says that I will research and come back to you, or I will ask and come back to you. I will find out, something like that.
Yes. There's a lot of in bhakti. There's a lot of humility that needs to accompany this taking on this position that I'm not supposed to know everything, and accepting the fact that things that you don't know, things that you know but you would need to verify. And of course, there's a third category. Maharaj once said that there are things that you know, but you may not want to reveal based on the qualification of the speaker. So that's a little different scenario. But yes, you're right.
One thing I would like to add, Prabhu, it's not a question, just I got a privilege of hosting the question and answer session in the New York City Radha Yatra from past 6 years or so. So Guru Maharaj was giving me this service to prepare the schedule with all the Maharajas. So similar questions were being asked, or kind of variations, or sometimes if no one were there, I used to give the same questions to different Maharaj just to engage the crowd, right? So the beauty of this is most of the Maharaj, they used to quote scriptures, but their particular perception would come out, right? Like their realizations. So that is the purity which I experienced with this kind of. I was privileged, I can say, to have various Maharajas give the similar answers. Just a sharing.
It's a wonderful realization because speaking according to the parampara does not mean that you become a parrot.
Yep.
For every question, you don't say open quotes, don't close quotes. You're of course entitled to your realizations, and that's what makes it sweeter. That's what makes things more relatable there. But it's important. That's why Prabhupada asked the third part when Maitreya says that yata shruti yata mati. He says yata shruti yata mati yata acharya. That you realize based on what your activity is, and then you speak according to the three of them.
Hare Krishna, one more comment. We also say sometimes according to time, place, and circumstances. For example, in the Chaitanya Lila as a time, in the context, it was phrased like that. But now we live in this era. There's mobile phone, there is Facebook, there is all this. Sometimes you add a bit the same message, but goes in the way we live nowadays. Like people who say, "Oh, don't waste your time on Facebook," or at that time there was no Facebook, but you can put the same message, but in the context of the actual context.
So the point you're making is that because the information gets disseminated widely, it's important to establish the context when presenting it. Otherwise, it might get misinterpreted.
Yes.
That's a valid point. Yeah.
Also, Prabhu, I just have one question actually, as from the discussions. How do we know we are sharing the realization, not making the mental speculation? Is there a way to guide ourselves, not going in the wrong direction?
So realizations are very real. The first word of the realization is real. Sometimes we see the thing that realizations are. I'm chanting and I have a picture of Krishna come in my mind. That's a realization. That's not it. Realization is another word for Vigyan, right? So something that we experientially absorb, and there is no ambiguity about it, right? So, so you're an initiated devotee. One of the realizations that you have is that you need to chant 16 rounds every day. There's no ambiguity about it. Now, another person who's not at that level may not have that realization. May have, but may not have. But you definitely will have that realization. Important to follow the instructions of the Guru. So realizations are what come after you begin to practice. So the possibility of the possibility of straying away is even lesser when you're speaking out of your realization. Because if you look at the three stages, Yatha Shruti, that you heard the whole Bhagavatam, 18,000 verses. Yatha Mati, you understood, I'm taking an example, you understood 10,000 verses. And Yatha Gati, that out of those, you found that these are the things that are actionable. That the Bhagavatam says that one should hear and speak the message of Bhagavatam on a daily basis, and then you made that a part of your practice. Nityam Bhagavat Sevaya. Every day you started reading or hearing the Bhagavatam, and then you had, based on that practice, you have realizations. That is the most concrete and relatable thing that you can share. So we are actually on our safest ground. So, and the premise is that everything is done with sincerity. We are on our safest ground when we are sharing our genuine realizations. We are not sharing mental speculations. We are not sharing, things like flights of fancy. But we are following the process, and what we are actually experiencing by following the process, that is realizations. So if we are sincerely sharing our realizations, and that is why they are most powerful also. Why? Because they represent the accrual of these three things. Yatha Shruti, Yatha Mati, Yatha Gati. These three things are accrued and they fructify in your realizations.
Prabhu, one more comment. I was reading one of Prabhupada's letter to, I forgot what letter it was from for whom. Prabhupada was about to leave the planet, and he said that everything is in my book. I don't have any more to say. That means, he already said everything in his book. This is what Prabhupada said.
Yes. True. It is factually true.
Yeah, all this purport, when sometimes you read, it's incredible the amount of thing he put in that purport, and it's amazing.
Yeah. And Prabhupada would say that he said that I poured my blood and heart into this purport. So another way of him saying that they're a result of his mature realization.
Mhm.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, we can start the next chapter. So, so quick recap on the 6th chapter, and then we will start with the 7th chapter. So the 6th chapter is almost entirely devoted to the creation of the universal form, and it picks up the thread from the point that from the Pradhan, Prakriti is created, from Prakriti Mahatattva is created, from Mahatattva the Brahman is created. Once the Brahman is created, this universe, it has the 23 elements in it, but they're all passive. They're just there. And then the Devas, the elemental Devas, their service is now to assist Krishna in the next stage of creation. So at the end of the 5th chapter, we see them praying to Krishna for empowerment so that they can continue with their service. So in response to those prayers, Krishna, and this is Karnodaksha Vishnu, he expands into the universe as Garbhodaksha Vishnu and fills the lower half of the universe with the water from his body, which becomes the Garbhodaka ocean. And within this water, the Virat Purush begins to develop. So for a period of 1,000 celestial years, the Virat Purush develops in the water of the ocean. And this chapter is almost entirely dedicated to the description of the development of the Virat Purush. So different aspects of the Virat Purush are described, and how they relate to the different creations or the different abilities in the universe. So from his eyes, from his ears, from his skin, and from his hands. So the different devas came, the different senses come, different abilities come, different sense objects appear. In this chapter, the Dravya part is not described. In other chapters, the Dravya part is also described. That how from the subtle elements, the gross elements also came. So in this chapter, it says that the ability to hear comes. But then but hearing also results in the creation of ether. And similarly, smell results in the creation of earth. So how everything gross and subtle is manifested through the Virat Purush. And then there is a description of the Virat Purush. Burijan Prabhu says that he is the blueprint of the universe, that essentially the universe expands from him. And he is the subtle body. If you consider the universe to be a singular living entity, then Garbhodaksha Vishnu is considered to be the soul. And the Vishwaroop is the subtle body. And the material universe that falls on the eyeballs, it's the gross body. Then Maitreya Rishi continues to describe the Virat Purush from different aspects. That how the upper, middle, and lower planetary system come from the Virat Purush. And then how the Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudras come from the Virat Purush. And then he ends the description of the Virat Purush by making the statement that it is almost impossible to understand him. And then in the concluding part of the chapter, he speaks a little bit more about the impossibility of understanding the Lord. And he makes the statement, which we had quite a bit of discussion on how one should receive and internalize and speak about the glories. And he makes the statement how some people lament at the fact that they can't understand the glories. Some people are amazed when they see the impossibility of understanding the glories. And then some people accept the fact that the glories are infinite. It's like the Brahman and the cobbler. The Brahman, he was not at all surprised by what Krishna was doing, because he said Krishna has unlimited glories. He can do anything that he wants. So that brings us to the end of the 6th chapter. The 7th chapter is titled Further Inquiries by Vidura. It's got 42 verses. And the background of this chapter is that so Vidur has now heard how Krishna created the universes by glancing at the material nature, which consists of the modes. And he has heard about the manifestation of the material universe. Now he will ask about the relationship of Krishna with the material world and the jivas. So these two questions are almost immediately answered by Maitreya. And Vidur, he accepts he speaks several verses, at least 8 verses he speaks in happiness, in euphoria, that the answers that Maitreya you have given me, they're enlivening me so much, and they're satisfying me. And the rest of the chapter is further questions by Vidur. So in almost 16 verses, Vidur will ask several questions of Maitreya. Actually, he asks, there's almost a one-to-one correspondence. He asks 16 questions. After the first 2 questions, which are answered then and there, he will ask 16 more questions of Maitreya. And then he will conclude the chapter by once again glorifying Maitreya. That only you can give me authoritative answers. So that's why I'm taking shelter of you. So this is just following the Vedic etiquette. Okay. So Prem Kishore Prabhu, I don't remember now, but did I share with you a table of the list of questions asked by Vidur and the corresponding references to the answers by Maitreya?
1 second, Prabhu. I don't think you've shared, but let me check it again.
Maybe I did not. I will send it to you today. We don't need it today. We are almost out of time. We don't need it today, but I'll send it to you today, and we can share it.
Yeah, I don't have it.
You don't have it? Okay. Okay, I'll send it to you. Okay, so I will start with the first verse, 371. Shri Sukvacha evam bruvana maitreyam dvapayena suto badaha priyanyaniva bharatya vidura pratyabhashata. Sri Sukadev Goswami said, O king, while Maitreya, the great sage, was thus speaking, Vidur, the learned son of Dwapayan Vyas, expressed a request in a pleasing manner by asking this question. So, in the 5th chapter of the 3rd canto, Maitreya had said that the Lord is the seer, and the external energy, which is seen, works as both cause and effect in the cosmic manifestation. And then he said that the external energy is known as Maya. And through her agency only is this entire material manifestation made possible. So, Vidur, now this was almost a chapter ago, but Vidur has been thinking about this point that was made by Maitreya. So this is made in the 5th chapter, 3rd canto, verses 25 and 26. So it shows a very close interaction between Krishna and Maya and the Jivas. Because he says that the Lord is the seer and the external energy is the seen, and through the external energy, the Lord is creating this cosmic manifestation. So just by the principle of transitivity, one can say that the Lord is creating the material creation, which we do say, authoritative statement. But then Vidur is saying that if the degrees of separation between the Lord and the material world are so transparent or so conductive, then what is to stop the Lord from being contaminated with the material world? Now, these words like contamination, etc., are used from our context. That because we know the influence of the material energy is that it causes one to turn away from Krishna, we call it contaminating. And Vidur is thinking from that perspective. He says, I know how insidious Maya is. I know what the effect is. It is satasat. It creates this cycle of cause and effect. It creates the sense of ownership and doership, proprietorship, ego. So at the end of the day, he is asking that, doesn't Krishna become proud when he creates this universe? Doesn't he become sad when he destroys the universe? Doesn't he become tired when he has to take care of the ongoing support of the universe? And same question is also asking for the jivas. So Sukadeva Goswami says that his mode of inquiry, so this is Vidur's mode of inquiry, is Bharatya. So Bharatya means that it is in line with the etiquette of a disciple inquiring from his guru. It is literally, it means pleasing, that he's talking in a pleasing way. Sukadeva, however, uses the word iva, as if. Vidu iva means as if. So to indicate that Vidur, he could not really please Maitreya by these words, because Maitreya could understand the contamination behind the words. So it's more of a subtle point. That the point he's making is that these questions, they were as if pleasing. So they were pleasing in the sense that they were asked with deference. They were asked with proper etiquette. But they were not fully pleasing, because they indicated that Vidur still did not understand or he was still, in his mind, there were still contaminations with respect to the position of Krishna. Again, like I said, it's a subtle point. And Maitreya, of course, is not going to let that stop him from appreciating the question and answering it. Okay, so I'll stop over here. And I just said one verse. Are there any questions, comments? No? Okay. So we'll stop here. And
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Like you mentioned in the end that like it is not fully pleasing because he couldn't understand because of contamination. Because with the relation that Vidur is having, so far with Krishna, from so long, and and the Tirthayatras that he performed and all those things together, like, is he not beyond modes, Prabhuji? Because without modes, how can he get such a mercy from Krishna? And in the beginning also you mentioned that, like, he went Tirthayatras because he is not fully purified. Can you please clarify? Because I was thinking that out of humility he may think that he is not pure, but it is not pleasing to others, is not so convinced. Yeah, please.
So I think these. This question comes up many times in the context of these conversations between great personalities, like. Why was Arjun making those points to Krishna? Was he not pure? Why is Vidur asking those questions? Is he not pure? Maharaj Parikshit is called a Mahabhagavad. Why is he asking those questions from Sukadeva Goswami? General answer is in the same realm, that great personalities are doing their services, and they're also drawing enjoyment from Krishna Katha. They're putting doubts on our behalf that now we are not at that level, but other people, when they read more deeply, it's likely they will have those questions. That Krishna is so intricately aligned with the material world. Doesn't he get influenced by it? People who have less knowledge, they also make this point that Krishna takes birth and he's a politician and he's this and he's that. How can he be God? So a lot of it is proxying, that they're proxying on behalf of others, doing it as a service.
Yeah, I told you 100 times.
Okay, so we'll end here. Vanchakalpatarubhayascha kripa sindhubhya cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Anant Koti Vaishnavind ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.